Not the greatest timing, I'm aware, but we're back. We're back. I figured a different approach was warranted for today's stream because of a couple things actually. One of them just being that, like, I feel like I get stuck in my own head. My brain kind of stalls whenever I have this like preset list of things to talk about. I'm gonna try just not going off that list, just speaking into the ether, no text document or anything like that. What I am gonna do is duplicate this so I can bring it up in another tab here. There we go. And have Twitch up here. Okay. There were things that have been like happening today, but I think I've got an idea, which is I don't want this stream to just be news coverage. I want this stream to be politics. Not news, politics. I'll explain what I mean by that. Also, my voice is straining a lot, which is unfortunate. But, you know, you do what you can. Notably, none of those voice training exercise videos tell you how to develop a voice that feels natural. It's always like you have to consciously flex your muscles in a very different way. There's like, it's kind of frustrating. And I know I'm not very deep into it, but even still, you know. So now let me explain what I mean when I say that I want this channel to be politics, but not necessarily news. News is political, but so is all media. And I feel like in some ways the focus on news coverage is sort of to the detriment of my political analysis, because they try to front a lot of the political analysis with pundits, which ends up kind of muddying the waters because they get some things half correct and there's a lot of inconsistencies, and it's hard to disentangle their biases from the facts they've chosen to present sometimes, you know? So I think I'm just going to talk about things that interest me. So there's going to be like, hello, welcome back, Kayla the Furry. There's going to be more, I'm going to talk probably more about discourse and media and stuff on the channel. Just in an effort to, you know, talk about more things that I just kind of feel like talking about. And I know that discourse easily leads to drama, but I think I've become pretty good at analyzing the arguments and things people say rather than projecting that into their character, especially if they are on the left, you know, nominally. I think it's not terribly difficult to project an accurate image of the psychological character of a conservative because they are simpletons. But, you know, nonetheless, that's what I think I want to do. That being said, today we are gonna enjoy not Twitter discourse because the Epstein files are still coming out. I put out one video to this effect. The stream from yesterday became a video segment that just got uploaded to my channel. But that's already outdated. And if you're watching the stream, then you've probably seen that already because that's just stuff from the stream yesterday. So now today I get to dive back in without like having to worry about, oh yeah, I have to make this a segment because people like would know where I stand on this. So starting with, I suppose the like funniest thing to come out of this reminds me when the media portrays straw man. It's kind of like that, but more so, it's like the straw man is so integral to the article that it's like not difficult to like disentangle per se. I'm good at reading media bias, but it's like um it feels kind of derivative in the sense that it almost feels like I'm ceding ground to a set of facts that could have already been editorialized or something like that. I don't know. It's never sat quite right with me because there's a million different places you could get news coverage from. And I guess like there's some value in doing that. I'm not going to forsake talking about the news entirely, but I want the reason that people stick around on my channel to be political analysis, the lens of analysis and critical thinking, which means more stuff than just news coverage. Because I've seen how people think whose brains are very influenced by consuming a lot of news coverage. I kind of see here for your personality. Thank you. And that's the hope. I'm hoping that my personality can drive the stream a bit more. I don't want to have, I think the most concise way I could probably put it is I don't want to have the news driving the stream so much because I think sometimes my personality gets a little lost in that, uh, you know, or I feel like I'm not able to express as much when I do that. Anyways, the Epstein files, that's what I wanted to talk about because it is extremely funny. Okay, it's grim and it's some of it is not funny at all, but it is also really funny because it offers a lens into the absolute incompetence of the fascist and of the Trump administration particularly. So I don't know why they tagged Representative Jeffries. They should be tagging Ro Khanna here, but um, this is true of a lot of the files. So Adobe Acrobat has a redaction feature, and that redaction feature is very sloppy. Or it's possible they didn't even use the redaction feature. I've used the redaction feature in Adobe Acrobat enough to know that the text underneath actually gets buried when you save a copy of the document. Like it overwrites that text data to put the black bar. So somebody redacted this so incorrectly that you could just highlight the text and you'd see the text underneath. Isn't that why it's the same color as the text? Yes, but the important difference here is that what they did essentially, the incorrect redactions essentially amounts to picking the highlighter tool and selecting black highlighter to go over the text, you know, with like a couple extra steps. If you actually properly redacted these files, the underlying text data underneath would actually be gone and it would just be a black bar. So like if you highlighted it and copied and pasted, you would just get a blank space. It'd be like you tapped the space bar, right? But apparently they did this so incorrectly that people have been able to, there's been a flood of revelations of Trump and various other people whose names are under these very sloppy redactions. Here is one document, unclassified document from the FBI, where the victims' names are redacted. Yeah, this is the goofiest timeline. This is fucking insane. This person called FBI NTOC to report information regarding Jeffrey Epstein, a Jeffrey Epstein party. They provided the following information. Blank met Lisa Villeneuve at a hospital where they were roommates in 2000. Villeneuve now goes by Ghislaine Lisa Villeneuve and lives in Irvine, California. So does that mean you can like undo the blacking? Yes, many people have, in fact. That's what I think this is a product of. Like, this was one of the incorrectly redacted things. Trump's name here was redacted incorrectly. So the long and the short of this being that, you know what? Actually, no long and the short of this. Let me. So we actually got the Epstein files. Kind of. We got about like a third at most of the Epstein files that have been released, right? So like not even half of the files have been released as of today. But like, yeah, total Trump loyalist defeat. It's like this, it's all of the incompetence and like bad optics of you're blatantly covering it up with none of the efficacy of having successfully covered it up. Like, they're all still implicated. It's right here. Later that year in 2000, after Blank and Villeneuve left the hospital, they remained friends. Later that year in 2000, around Christmas time, Villeneuve invited Blank to a party on Palm Beach Island, Florida. Blank believes the house belonged to Epstein. Before the party, Villeneuve took Blank to meet Bobby Cox. Cox was a young man and introduced himself as a model scout. Oh boy. Dude, it was so obvious. Villeneuve, let's see, Villeneuve laughed in response to Cox's introduction and said, "No, you're a pimp." Villeneuve, Cox, and Blank then went to the party. They entered the property through the backyard, and Villeneuve said she would go inside to speak with the hostess, which Blank believes was Ghislaine Maxwell. Reasonable guess, but, we don't know for sure. When Villeneuve took Blank inside, Villeneuve told Blank to stay close and not go into any of the rooms. Villeneuve took Blank to meet a man named Kurt Schmidt, who's currently the CEO of Blue Buffalo. What is Blue Buffalo? Dog food company. So the CEO of this company is implicated in the Epstein sex trafficking scheme. Very good. Thank you. When Villeneuve and Blank approached Schmidt, he asked Villeneuve if Blank was cool. Blank stated she was cool. Villeneuve said, no, he means cool to have sex. Schmidt said, no. Wait. Schmidt said, no, he meant cocaine. I think. Which said, no, they meant cocaine. Villeneuve took Blank back inside, and someone told the party that Donald Trump had invited them all to a party at Mar-a-Lago. Blank told Villeneuve she wanted to go, but Villeneuve told Blank it wasn't that kind of party, it was for prostitutes. Blank hasn't spoken to Villeneuve since 2002. So Trump running a child sex trafficking ring out of Mar-a-Lago, nothing that we didn't expect, but, again, they failed to redact this information as much as they really wanted to. Got a third of the files unredacted. This might be enough to get the rest non-redacted if people play their cards right. We don't need all the files to be unredacted. The important thing is that, like, the important thing is that enough of it is unredacted to know that Trump is a kingpin of child sex trafficking. It wouldn't matter if only a tenth of the files were unredacted in that sort of way, because like we have the information that we need and the political backlash is the same. The Justice Department has been feverishly trying to take the files down and like redact them. But I think at this point, like they have to know that it's a fruitless endeavor. Like, they're not going to be able to. They already haven't been able to. Even the files that they did take down and redact are out there in the open, unredacted, because they released them as such and then realized after the fact that, oops, we forgot. And then they tried to like say, nuh-uh, I take it back. It's like, you can't unpost something to the internet. That's not how it works. You know, that shit's out there forever now. I like watching people when they slowly realize they can't delete stuff off the internet. Yeah, that you kind of have to approach the internet knowing that anything you do is going to be up there forever. So you have to be prepared to potentially address it at some point in the future, you know? Uh, Frankly, this isn't a problem if you stand by the shit that you said, or like that you say or post, or if you don't, that you own that you don't. It's like, yeah, that was stupid, and then move on. Thank you, Autism Speak. Very funny. Not now, kitten. The walls are closing in on Daddy. This is that was in response to this tweet from the Justice Department, getting hideously ratioed. By the way, um, they're like, it's so desperate. They've released nearly 30,000 more pages of documents. By the way, another tiny drop in the bucket compared to like how many files there are in total. Some of these documents contain untrue and sensationalist claims made against President Trump that were submitted to the FBI right before the 2020 election. To be clear, the claims are unfounded and false. If they had a shred of credibility, they would have been weaponized against President Trump already. Weaponized against, yeah. So basically, they're saying, okay, fine, you can have the Epstein files, some more of the Epstein files, but just so you know, it was part of the 2020 attempt to thwart Trump's re-election, and also all of these people making claims against Trump are cantankerous whores or something, right? I don't think there's like a more cartoonish way. Again, it's the classic phenomenon that if you ask the Onion to write something like this, they wouldn't be able to, because it would just be this. Like, yeah, like literally trying to preface like, we know this looks bad for Trump, but I promise all the women accusing him of rape are like lying whores or something. It's actually very entertaining to watch. And I do think that like, I saw something from, who was it? It was the same guy who I referred to with that one video about consumer spending and about the debt crisis that America is going through. He mentioned something that I want to talk about a little bit about, what's the term? Inherent contempt. Like, there's a reason that Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie are pursuing that specifically, which is that like it can potentially, it's basically a waterproof way to get like as many people as possible that are implicated to go down with the ship. Let me see if I can find that. Who is let's just search inherent contempt. Top maybe? Okay, here it is. This is Adam Cochran. I found this kind of interesting. Seeing a lot of confusion about Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna's inherent contempt move. Here's what you need to know. This is not a federal charge, it's a procedural charge. Trump cannot pardon inherent contempt. That's one big reason to do this. Either the House or Senate can charge inherent contempt by itself and does not need both houses to agree. Another reason to go for this. The sergeant at arms would arrest the person in contempt and bring them before the House for a trial. Failure to resolve means they can be held in custody of Congress. So Congress basically has some authority pursuing inherent contempt to act as law enforcement unto themselves. Like basically they don't have to rely on the other branch, the other house of Congress or the executive branch to enforce the law, which is particularly important here because the issue is that the executive is engaging in a massive cover-up. Perjury in this session is its own new crime. If Trump pardoned perjury or the cover-up during this, then Bondi loses her Fifth Amendment protections related to those crimes and can be compelled to testify. And the pardon itself would be a pardon of ill intent, and its acceptance creates a new crime of blackmail or conspiracy as it's part of a cover-up, creating a liability for Bondi and the president as it's no longer an official act, and contempt is a continual crime. If the pardon forgave prior contempt and Bondi was still in contempt after, it would be a new crime not protected by the pardon. It's rarely been used because the optics require a lot of united political will, but it's a very clever and specific charge that Congress has for exactly this purpose. So the president can't have his DOJ sidestep congressional authority. This is really important. I feel like they're going to be able to get somewhere with this precisely because it's like, okay, this is the worst case scenario charge where it's like the entire executive is behaving obstinately and with the intent to cover up criminal acts. So we're going to use the mechanisms that allow us to just go around that, you know? Yeah, I love when like there are so many systems that have failed that you have to you're like, okay, we have to explicitly work around this. We can't try to incorporate these systems into the plan because they're compromised. The entire executive branch is compromised in this instance in a very specific pedophilia flavored way. Where unbelievably, Congress is comparatively much less so, almost infinitely less so. You know? The more Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie work for this, the more I'm convinced that like I don't think there's any way out of this that doesn't involve a lot of rats going down with the sinking ship. And in this case, I do maybe mean like legally too. The fact that they are specifically invoking things that would allow Congress to exercise authority to arrest and try for procedural or eventually criminal offenses people involved in this cover up. The only thing that Pam Bondi can do is go to Congress and tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth to avoid getting somebody else implicated or arrested on the spot. Because as they outline, if she lies, perjury is its own new crime. And it will be blatantly obvious she is not good at lying. And the sergeant at arms can just arrest her. If Trump tries to pardon her, he actually can't. And if he does, she loses the Fifth Amendment. She has to tell them everything, which then implicates everybody else in the government. But if she's truthful, she implicates everybody else anyway, right? Basically, like, to me, this is evidence that Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie give enough of a shit about this that they're like, okay, none of you are going to stop us because that would implicate you too. We are going to like move heaven and earth to dredge through these Byzantine liberal systems and, you know, start with the attorney general and work our way from there, investigating this criminal conspiracy. Again, to me, like the important thing I want to point out is that it feels like this is one of those things where uh, it's such an obvious like it's such an obvious thing to pursue. Like, oh, wow, the entire executive branch is engaging in a cover up scheme for the world's richest and most powerful pedophiles, not the least of which being President Trump himself. You know, anybody like, remember not to strain your voice too hard. I know, I'm trying. I don't know what makes my voice more or less gravelly on a given day. What I'm saying here is basically imagine being the one congressperson that sees this and is like, I don't support this, right? Imagine like Thomas Massey, Ro Khanna, they're going to every news outlet they can. They're posting to Twitter. Everybody's talking about it. Inherent contempt. Get Pam Bondi in front of Congress, compel her to testify, hold her in contempt, pursue perjury charges if she lies. Imagine you being a congressperson that tries to hold up this process, right? Imagine what that makes you look like. So everybody else has to, like, the people who are implicated in Congress, they have to stay quiet. They have to just let it happen and hope that they don't get caught by it, you know? And I think that's super important. And again, it also demolishes all the arguments from either the Democrats or Republicans that they can't do anything because, you know, the party that isn't in power is using the filibuster to obstruct us, or like we're the party that's not in power, so we actually can't do anything. Tee. A lot of these files predate the 2019 trial. The Bush administration had these. The Obama administration had these. The first Trump administration had these. The Biden administration had these. None of them released it. They all could have, but they didn't. The government really didn't want to release this. It took a completely overwhelming amount of pressure for Congress to compel the executive branch to release these files, these documents. And even now, they're dragging their feet. And it basically seems like this is a similar, although much more incompetently administered pattern of behavior that we've seen from prior administrations on the subject. Just don't talk about it, drag your feet, hope it goes away, you know? But there's kind of like a snowballing effect that every new release makes it look progressively worse for them, that they are dragging their feet and like being very obstructionist in this way. And, you know, not the least of which being breaking the law repeatedly. They broke the law. This would be like 3 or 4 times that the government has broken the law just on the pattern of how they've released these files. Not even to account for the fact that they redacted the names of a bunch of the co-conspirators and other members of this child sex trafficking network. Those redactions are all violations of the law. Pulling files that were already released, that is a violation of the law. And failing to redact the victim's information, also a violation of the law. That's reckless endangerment. And everybody who complied with the instructions that the DOJ and the administration gave them is guilty of breaking all 3 of those laws. Or breaking the law in those 3 different ways. Hell, if I'm a judge and I'm looking at this, I'm considering every separate redaction of Trump's name as its own crime, right? Like, Yeah, I actually, it is gonna be so funny when somebody faces the music for this and they immediately bust out the Nuremberg defense again. There's a reason that we call it the Nuremberg defense, and it's not because it worked. It's because it didn't work. Like, I was just following orders is not an excuse. It's not a defense. I was following orders is an explanation, but the implication that you lift some moral weight from yourself by saying that you are following orders is that is not a thing. There's a reason that it has a name. Can't believe some people think that line of logic makes sense. Well, I mean, yeah, otherwise they wouldn't run to it. Look, it's the same kind of brain mechanism uh, that people refer to with the maxim that one day everybody will have always been against this, right? That's the person who did the crime attempting to virtue signal that actually they were not morally okay with the crime, even though they did it anyway, right? This was the case with the civil rights movement, where a lot of really racist people had to start pretending that they weren't racist. This was the case. This is the case with various genocides, where after the fact you can't like socially be accepted if you're pro genocide, like with Palestine, like with the Holocaust, like with what are other genocides? Burma, Cambodia, etc. The Khmer Rouge, right? Um, and so too today with like the Epstein files. Um, the social pressure has to be overwhelming, and we have to remind people who all of a sudden were always against it that they weren't actually always against it, right? Like that's kind of how the tide of history ebbs and flows. Not to sound like a liberal, but you know, basically I'm ideologically pro bullying because people deserve to be bullied for the rancid things they believe. The exception to this is bullying in school. Kids don't deserve to be bullied, I think. Because usually the bullying doesn't happen on the basis of them like not thinking that black people are people, right? Like when bullying happens in politics and online discourse, it's either dumb drama shit or it's like such and such company used AI and they're like, why are you upset? Why are you upset? And everybody bullies them and hideously ratios them, thus reinforcing the cultural zeitgeist of everybody fucking hates AI because it's useless, soulless, and anti-human. Right? Or it's, the government being bullied for how obviously complicit it is in the cover up of the Epstein files, thus reinforcing the cultural zeitgeist, the narrative that the government is covering up the Epstein files, you know, or bullying Zionists to reinforce the narrative in people's minds that, yeah, Israel is committing a genocide in Palestine and you deserve to be mocked and bullied for doing apologia to that effect. But when kids bully each other on the playground, it's never usually something coherent like that. Usually it's like, haha, you have glasses or something. Haha, you have like you have asthma. I don't know. Some dumb shit. I guess in that sense you could say parasocial bullying is good and real life bullying is less good. But if you have a racist friend, you should still bully them in real life too. Sorry, I don't want to waffle too long on that. This was something I saw that I found interesting. I'm going to try to find some corroborating information for this. Trump admin to begin garnishing wages of defaulted student loan borrowers in January, per CNBC. Let me look this up. Yep, here it is. In case you didn't know what garnishing wages means, basically, if you can't pay your student loan debt, the Trump administration is going to start stealing your wages to pay down that debt that you defaulted on. By the way, if you defaulted on your debt, it means you can't pay that debt. You don't have the means. So the Trump admin's like, that's fine. We'll just take whatever you have and leave you with nothing. For defaulted student borrowers. This person's a moron. Also, people, the comments, truly brain dead. They should, oh yeah, they should offer forgiveness for the medical field, not any other field, the medical field only. You are dumb for not going to university. You're smart for not going into debt. Anyways, a couple people being real brain dead, like, oh, well, they should get jobs. Like, garnishing wages doesn't happen if you don't have wages. Yeah, we used to do this. This used to be a thing before COVID, but then because of the economic strain that the pandemic put on everything and everyone, the government stopped doing this and they paused student loan debt. And for a long time, there was a discussion. I've talked about this at length on my channel. And unfortunately, I predicted some things incorrectly, led to me and a lot of others being very disappointed that the student loan debt was piled up so much that it couldn't like feasibly be resumed. They resumed the student loan payments anyway, because fuck you, I guess. But it constituted and still does constitute another debt crisis, this time for students and college grads, right? There's like 5 different debt crises, and this is one of them. And the Trump administration looked at this and said, yeah, let's make it worse. You know, because they just hate you. There's not that much analysis to provide apart from they hate you and they want all of your money. And, you know, they want to facilitate the transfer of capital from the bottom up, right? So that debt is attached to you. They want to capitalize off of that debt by taking it from you and turning it from a debt in your pocketbook to an actual hole in your pocketbook and an asset on their balance sheet, on their portfolios. It's like a parasite, keep sucking our blood until the creature dies. Yes, in fact, Marxist meme incoming. Marx writes about this. Like, the explanation of this in the Marxian sense is like, oh, capital is dead labor that feeds off of the living, right? Literally, capital is the, economically realized product of labor, right? In the sense that you have money, you have wealth in this quantifiable sense, and it's concentrated. And the incentive structure dictates that capital continue to grow as a product of labor, right? But in order to grow, it needs profit, which means that like it has to extract. And if not profit, then interest, debt. Capital is literally a vampire, a blood-sucking parasite, dead labor that feeds off of the economic vitality of the living. These students whose wages will soon be garnished by the government for not being able to pay their debts, completely ass backwards, by the way, are are like new economic lifeblood of this country. Young people, they're going to go do things. Not even necessarily to say like, oh yeah, economic productivity, haha, line go up. No, just in the sense that they are young, active participants in society. That makes them the living labor of this country, right? And capital being the forces that they are indebted to by virtue of predation and exploitation. People do not fucking understand the 30 something page contract that you have to sign or whatever to take out a student loan when you're like 18 or something. Some people younger, like 17. That capital can only sustain itself by sabotaging the economic well-being of that economic lifeblood of the country, by draining it, right? That's why debt dominates the economic system. This fucking system, man, it's so transparently exploitative. It used to be, right? It used to be, I remember this, that the right wing would often try to bake some kind of moral justification for why you should pay your debt, right? Why it's morally good to pay off your debt. And if you don't want debt, just don't go to college. We saw some of that in the replies a little bit. But I've noticed that kind of drop off a cliff because look at this. They tried. They tried to pay the debt. They couldn't. They weren't able to. And so now the argument is just, whatever, we'll just break your kneecaps and take it anyway. Right? There's no more moral justification for why this system needs to exist. Yeah, like a parasite, they don't stop drinking the blood when the host is dying because they need to. They need the blood to live, right? So the problem is just you have to be okay with killing the parasite. If there is a blood-sucking parasite that's drinking your blood and it's hurting you, you have to be like, okay, rip this fucking thing out and like set it on fire and kill it so I can live freely again. Right? The same thing applies here. Capital is a blood-sucking force that destroys the economic base of this country, the base being people who go out in their daily lives and do shit and want to learn and want to make friends and want to, make tasty food for one another. Yum, yum. And like, who enjoy fucking and watching movies and that sort of shit. Right? Like normal people are the economic lifeblood of the country. And that when that's being undercut, you don't try to like provide the parasite with more blood. You have to kill the parasite. Capital is a parasite. You know? Look no further to all the people who are very familiar with like internet economics and internet like politics to the extent of like everything as a service. Look no further than in shitification. What would otherwise be a vibrant social venue for people to engage with each other, the internet, is being destroyed, gutted, put behind paywalls, consolidated, overridden with AI to entrench the parasite that drains money from you, right? The more you look at this shit, like the bare minimum moderate solution to this is to, number one, forgive all student debt, and number two, make college free. That is the moderate solution. The more appropriate solution would be to ban private college altogether and like make every college a state college, or a college like a college owned and run by the state or the city or the town or whatever, and it be funded directly by tax money, preferably by the state, right? Not like federal government, but like a college in the state of New York would be owned and run by New York, paid for by taxes in the state of New York. So you don't have to pay like tuition fees or nothing. Yeah, when the parasite runs out of blood, it blames the host. The moderate solution is to make all public college tuition free and forgive all student debt instantly. That way, you'll run a lot of those private colleges out of business. And you want that to happen, by the way. College being tens of thousands of dollars per year, sometimes per semester, is not sustainable for a country. You have to get rid of that. That's the parasite that, like, everywhere you turn, oh, pay up this exorbitant amount of money, pay up that exorbitant amount of money, pay up, pay up, pay up. And people don't have the money to do that. You know, again, free public college and student loan, like complete student debt forgiveness, is the moderate solution. Anything short of that doesn't solve the problem even remotely. And the appropriate solution would be just to say, all right, you've had your fun. Colleges can no longer be privately owned. They will be owned by the city and the state, and they will be owned by, they will be funded completely by tax money. It will be illegal to charge tuition fees for college. That is a more realistic solution to prevent this from happening long term. And of course, that's even moderate because it considers this as a vacuum and not like as a part of a larger economic system that works exactly like this all the time for everything, right? Think of how much debt people have to go into to buy a house, to buy a car, right? Cars are not necessarily essential, but this is America and it's insanely car dependent. So obviously cars are going to be like really expensive when there's such market capture on the part of like dealerships and car manufacturers. Housing, you literally die without. So that needs to be decommodified. Water and utilities, you would die without water. You would have a hard time surviving without electricity or gas because that's your fucking heat supply for the winter. In sometimes very poorly insulated buildings. So yes, that needs to be decommodified too. You know, food needs to be decommodified because, you know, you die if you don't have food. Medicine needs to be decommodified. Plenty of people in this country die for lack of medical care for how prohibitively expensive it is. Everything needs to be decommodified. All the ways and means of life need to be decommodified so that people can live. The only reason you would do this, the only reason that schemes like this exist is pure extortion, funneling money out of the public, like out of the body politic, the people who need to use that money to spend on things or who want to go about their daily life and do all that shit, and funnel it into the companies who ultimately don't provide services. Rather, they gatekeep services. We need to stop thinking of private businesses as entities and institutions that provide services. They gatekeep services. Their job is not to give you, like, an internet provider is not, like, their job is not to provide internet infrastructure. Their job is to charge you for internet infrastructure. That internet infrastructure heavily subsidized. A lot of the infrastructure that we rely on, the essentials that we rely on, are very heavily subsidized. Ultimately, that's being provided by the government. The only role that the private companies serve is to charge you, is to make it cost more, so that money can be funneled upwards and consolidated because they're parasites. That's the only way that they're capable of functioning. So you have to just cut that function out entirely, right? You get me. As if you needed another reminder that this is a socialist live stream, right? But like seriously, it's one of the it's a giant problem. And I feel like a lot of these debt crises are going to come to a head at about the same time because when people have a hard time paying for stuff, they don't just immediately decide, okay, well, I need to be able to comfortably pay for these other things. So I'm going to drop this one thing, right? What happens is people tend to spread themselves thinner and thinner. They try to make it work. Everybody wants to make it work. They try to make it work until eventually they just can't for anything. Yeah, the economy is going to blow up. Hell, a lot of people, I've seen a few headlines to this effect. A lot of people have like given up looking for work because they're like, shit, unemployment is better than having to work a job because I'd be in the same spot either way. Like I have to spend money to get to work, doesn't fucking pay me anything. And, you know, basically it's like, oh, it's just as cost effective for me to be depressed, skip a meal, and rot in my apartment as like working whatever job. And it's not like they're hiring anyways. Definitely something I've been thinking about now that I'm looking for work as well. Again, that is. Obviously, a lot of places aren't going to be uh, hiring until early next year. But it helps to start looking early. UBI coming soon out of economic desperation. Yeah, it does seem like that. Like if you desperately want to apply a band-aid that helps hold this together for just a little bit longer, it seems like UBI would be the way to do that. But ultimately, I think that the capital class and the Trump administration is like too stupid to even do that. UBI might be the one thing the Trump administration could wrap their head around. But for the capital class, whose job is purely to extract money, they couldn't comprehend of money having to be funneled back downwards too for anything to keep working. So I doubt if that's going to happen. I think we just see the debt crisis absolutely blow up, and then somebody has to be there to pick up the pieces. You know, we're fucked either way. Yeah. Look, humanity has survived other periods of very sharp decline and will survive this, but it's going to be fucking rough, you know? The thing about crisis, the one silver lining is that crisis tends to force a lot of really difficult political discussion, right? When crisis becomes literally unavoidable, even right-wing governments have to turn to social democracy and even sometimes socialism, right? In the Great Depression, a lot of countries did not have single payer healthcare systems. They didn't have like a well defined health system. They didn't have very much in the way of consumer protections. They didn't have banking regulation. That crisis was so bad, it forced even right wing governments, from fascist to Christian Democrat to like center liberals, to adopt regulatory measures that they otherwise really would not want to do. There will be no more pod people, inshallah. God, I hope. One of the reason that like one of the big reasons that pod people exist is that everything's just so expensive. You like what can you do that doesn't cost money. Like if you want to go out with friends and stuff, you can go on a walk. That's free. What like actual thing could you go and do that doesn't cost money, right? Everything that costs money is getting more expensive, you know? Eating out, watching movies, traveling. Traveling already wasn't feasible, right? Fan fiction in your mind? Yeah, true. Shit, even internet, even hanging out with your friends like over the internet is becoming more expensive because like internet and energy prices are increasing, right? And another reason that like you get so many pod people is because a lot of the social functionality of space in towns and cities, like towns and cities exist as a sort of social lubricant too. A lot of spaces have historically been designed to facilitate people walking around with other people, sitting down with other people, talking with other people, existing in a certain space, right? You'll have chairs, you have tables outside, restaurants, public areas for seating, benches, places you can walk to, right? All of these are like the social landscape of a city. That has all been destroyed over time. I'm old enough to remember, I'm not very old, I'm 25. I'm old enough to remember when anti-homeless benches didn't exist. You could just sit on the bench in whatever fashion you liked. Now, not only are there anti-homeless benches, a lot of places have just started to remove public seating altogether. So even if you wanted to go out and do something, you could only ever pass through and not like sit down and talk about and appreciate the world around you. You must always be in transit. You can never stop to appreciate the world. You can never you must be in the pod. And in this case, the pod is mostly cars, you know? Like a lot of the public space in America has been hollowed out for cars. And yeah, like literally all of society's been destroyed just because of cars and because people don't want to see homeless people, I guess. So that's why everybody fucking lives in the pod now. It's because oh great, go outside with whom? To do what? To go where? Where am I going to sit? There's nothing. I hope that the accelerationists keep eating good. It legitimately, I feel like for myself and so many other people, it's very difficult to believe in something good being possible because of how entrenched neoliberal institutions are and how well they are optimized for preventing good things from happening, right? Not even necessarily for doing really bad things. They do a lot of really bad things too, but a lot of the neoliberal institutional rot largely permits bad things to happen just insofar as they are more effective at preventing good things from happening, right? I'm going to borrow a little bit from Wilhelm Reich here. The people are not ready for democracy. I still believe that democracy is good, but the mass psychology of the people have to be compatible with a democratic system. Everybody has to believe in the project of democracy for it to work. It's ironic that conservatives levy this critique at socialism and communism because that system has to exist under certain conditions where people would believe in at least certain democratic principles. Like, you don't have to be a socialist for a socialist system to work. But you do have to believe in democracy for a democratic system to work, which includes socialism, right? You do have to believe in democracy. Like, there has to be a critical mass of people that believe in democracy for either democracy or socialism to work. But neoliberal democracy is inherently contradictory and undemocratic in a lot of ways. And it sort of erodes that belief over time because it would be obstinate to people's natural desires and inclinations that, hey, we want to do these good things for ourselves and for others and for our communities in ways that may offend the interests of capital. And because of like the relationship between capital and the state, that's always going to be the overriding set of interests. So the moment society gets worse as a product of capital, the backslide is started. And it's inevitable that it eventually gets to the point that nobody believes in democracy as a system that can contribute to affirmative nation building anymore. Effectively, the neoliberals succeed where fascists try to achieve this but fail, in they make people incompatible with democracy. They make people submissive and breedable by abusing them so hard that they cease to believe in anything good, right? This is why you need the fucking re-education camps. This is why basically every business needs to be obliterated from orbit. The news outlets all need to be liquidated. And like mutual aid, cooperative fucking whatever needs to be the method by which people organize, get their news or whatever. I don't fucking know. Look, consult an economic expert for the details on how a socialist system would work and like how you would rebuild democracy. But you have to do some things that in the moment seem very undemocratic for democracy to survive and be viable. Like how media gets criticized if it thinks the future can be positive. Yeah, and I hate to say it, but a lot of people are right to critique optimistic media in this current climate. You know, depending on the kind of optimism it depicts, I should say. A show like Andor shows what I think optimism could be. Like Andor, as much as it is very doom inspiring in a lot of ways, and it sort of really shows how much suffering people in the Star Wars world had to go through before the rebellion ever really stood a chance. I think that there is an underlying optimism that we know eventually the empire is defeated, and it was defeated because people cared. Apathy is the death of society. And neoliberal institutions are very good at creating and perpetuating apathy. Right? Look, I've waffled for long enough. The point is, nobody believes in anything anymore, and it's going to take this system being destroyed for people to believe again. In fact, that's like for a lot of people, that's the only thing that's left to believe in, is that in the destruction of this system, something good might rise from the ashes, right? And what the left needs to do is show people that you don't just have to destroy the system in the way that the right wing wants to destroy it, by like making everything worse all the time and eroding whatever vague semblances of pillars still hold society up. You can just decide, yeah, you know what? I don't have to follow this rule. All of a sudden, we're going to do something good. Now everybody gets school lunches for free. Now everybody gets healthcare completely for free. Now your rent costs less. Now your groceries cost less. Now we, the city, own this utility company directly instead of having some fuck-ass commission board that lets the companies raise rates whenever they feel like and kills your pocketbook every month. You know, there's a lot of good that can be done by simply ignoring a neoliberal system. Yeah, Zoran Mamdani is the proof in the pudding, right? He knows how to navigate this system, but ultimately, I think what he intends to do also involves fundamentally breaking it at a certain level, right? Because the system is a very stagnant thing right now. You know, the political system that governs New York, that governs the United States, and to varying degrees, the world. It's more like it's kind of like this. A lot of people, especially on the right, believe that you will achieve something good by destroying the system. A lot of people on the left believe that you can destroy the system by doing good things, right? Do you understand the difference that I'm trying to get at there? Um, and those good things can inspire belief in good things being possible, right? And the way that said good things will destroy the system is that they will offend the interests that currently govern it, right? Like, for example, companies building data centers. You know, it would be a good thing to just stop those data centers. That would be one thing. But in a more affirmative sense, if you passed a regulation that prevented AI companies or that banned the use of AI, that required that all AI productions be watermarked as AI, that prevented companies from using copyrighted material in their AI generations and whatever else, right? Or if you like required a uh, consensus popular vote to build a data center, right? These are good things that would prevent the construction of AI data centers, but fundamentally they undercut the interests of the companies that build these data centers, that want to construct this endless network surveillance state where they get to observe, scrutinize, and note your every move for the purpose of advertising and building a credit portfolio and blackmailing you or whatever the fuck, right? By doing something good, you can fundamentally break the system. Whereas it isn't always the case that if you set out just to break the system, that you end up doing something good, right? You can break the system by putting a bunch of unconstitutional tariffs in place that double prices for everything everywhere. You could break the system by destroying the federal infrastructure for subsidizing and funding scientific research and medical care and things like that. There are plenty of things that, yeah, you could break the system by blowing everyone and everything up, by like dropping a bunch of bombs on various institutions, right? Like if you fly a fucking B-17 bomber and drop bombs on, I don't know, every fucking hospital in the country, that'd break the system, but it wouldn't do anything good. Or what you could do is you could nationalize all the hospitals so that healthcare becomes free at the point of service, and that breaks the system, right? You could break the system purely by building. Hell, part of the system is that it prevents stuff from being built, right? Like, so many local governments permit NIMBYs to have all this influence and like, oh, like there's so many layers of bureaucratization and like dragging your feet in the process of like, oh, building this affordable housing project or urbanizing or making this area more pedestrian friendly or whatever. One cantankerous old woman can like bring all that to a halt, or old man or old whatever the fuck can bring that all to a halt just because they don't want that built. Not because of anything that they enjoy in their lives, but purely because of like an aesthetic concern, right? Yeah. Fun fact. Also, welcome back, Bro the Boss. Fun fact. There is no law saying that the United States can't nationalize an industry. In fact, we've done this before. The United States partially nationalized the banking industry in the wake of 2008. Of course, because everyone in government is neoliberal pussies, they reprivatized the banks and gave them complete directorial control again. And in fact, America denationalized a lot of industries like arms manufacturing and internet infrastructure. That'd be a pretty weird law. Yeah, it would. It literally wouldn't make sense either. In fact, capitalism really started as like a project of hybrid nationalization, privatization. Think British East India Company. That's kind of like one of the big corporate forebearers of a capitalist system where they are engaging with the world in terms of markets, market share, and exploiting resources and people so that capital and wealth can flow from one place to another and, accruing profit all the while. Many hallmarks of capitalism there, and it relied upon nationalization and the guaranteeing force of the state, right? But, the moment a country wants to nationalize an industry to make things cheaper, then, capitalists shit themselves. Like when, I think when Salvador Allende in Chile wanted to like nationalize some industries in Chile. What did he nationalize? I forget. Here's Yeah, copper. Salvador Allende nationalized the Chilean copper industry, and America was not very happy with that, even though he was completely within his rights to do so. You know, and Chile was completely within their rights to do so. It's their copper industry, but America depended on this, so they wanted it to be privatized so that they do business with America. There's nothing stopping America from nationalizing every hospital in this country and saying, guess what? Now you provide care for free and we're paying you 3 times as much. We're going to pay every doctor 3 times as much. We're going to pay for the training and education of like millions more doctors. You provide care for free. All these middlemen are now gone, and it's now 10 times cheaper, despite the fact that you are being paid more. Congratulations. You have simultaneously fixed and broken the system because you've turned it into an entire different system. And by ran by the government, we don't mean just pay private people fat money. Yeah, no. And what we also don't mean is like a completely dependent department of the government that's subject to political decision making at a moment's notice, right? Think like the post office. Even the post office is not the best example because that's a private corporation now. It used to be a government corporation. Yeah. Think like schools. Schools, if you want to make public schools sound really scary, you can say that it's run by the government. But in reality, if somebody says that these schools are run by the government, you know they're full of shit because the schools are run by the staff that works at the schools. And it's funded by tax money from local and state taxes, and federal taxes too, actually. The decision making happens from the school board and the school administrators, and the curriculum, the outline of the curriculum is set at the state level. And it's like, okay, you got to teach these things. Anything else, you can do whatever else as long as you include this. You can do that for other stuff too. You're allowed to just do that. You're allowed to just do something good that makes an essential public service cost 0 money. It's the whole thing. Republicans defund a system, then it gets bad, then they say they need to privatize it to fix it. Then when they privatize it, still shit, and politicians get loaded with money. Yes, exactly. It's the cycle of privatization that they set out with the end goal of privatizing it. First, they have to undercut the success of the public service because private services could never compete with public services. Remember I was saying like gatekeeping versus providing things before. The job of the public sector is to provide goods and services, not to gatekeep it behind a paywall. The job of the private sector is to gatekeep those things that could be otherwise provided at the behest of the public behind a paywall. Again, think like public school versus private school. Private schools don't provide education, they gatekeep education behind a paywall. They're just less effective at it because public schools exist, and their job is to provide education, right? Part of the social contract is you pay taxes to fund public services. Tax brackets are progressive. It's the opposite of an extractive process. It is a downward distributive process. People in the higher income brackets pay more because they have more to contribute in terms of capital, right? Then anything that is a public service that is funded by these taxes, you don't have to pay for that. You paid your taxes. That's part of the social contract. You just get to have that, right? Rich and poor alike. You send your kid to public school, you don't got to pay for that. What are you, like, don't be ridiculous. You go to public school, that shit is free. You use the sidewalks, the roads, you don't got to pay for that shit. You already paid taxes. You're already part of this social contract. You use that shit for free. Right? The library. You don't like, sure, maybe they'll ask you to like sign up for a library card. You don't need to pay to borrow a book from the library. You can just walk in, like, hey, do you have this book? If they have it, great. If they don't, maybe you have to request an interlibrary loan or something. You get to read whatever book is present in the library for free. You can just do that. That's already paid for. If you pay taxes, all that shit is already paid for. The government can just do that. If we nationalized the railroad industry, we'd fix it so easily. The reason so shit is because corporations hog rail lines. Oh yeah, absolutely. The rail industry in the United States, the private rail industry, has no interest in being a lobby for like railroad interests because they're satisfied with the kind of market capture that they have. And it would rock the boat too much to advocate for more passenger rail than already exists. You know? People are so afraid of the government. Yeah. People are afraid of having to participate in society is what they're afraid of. They're afraid of democracy requiring effort. I got some bad fucking news for you. It does, and you need to get over yourself. Anybody who has this fear that like, oh no, public services are going to be like more difficult than private services. Number one, no, they're fucking not. But number two, like, oh no, you have to care about your community. Grow the fuck up, right? We're all grown-ups here. We understand that like part of the social contract is that you are a part of the social contract. You have to participate, right? I ultimately do think the deference to the private sector is a, like, in the sense that it exists in mass psychology, right? Like, in the way that it hasn't just been manufactured from the top down, or even in the way that it has, right? The way that people have internalized this is that they're just projecting their fear of freedom. They are projecting a fear of freedom onto public goods and services that everybody worked towards, paid taxes into, all agreed on as part of this social contract. And they want to basically delegate that authority to like something undemocratic that just says, don't worry about it. We'll make all these decisions. The irony of America having this problem, everywhere has this problem, but yes, America too. In America, it's just very libertarian coded. And I don't want to overstate the case with mass psychology being responsible for this. In a way, mass psychology is kind of responsible for the state of the discourse, but that mass psychology is manufactured from the top down by news outlets, lobbyists, donors, contributors, big companies, and the capital class writ large. Circling back, everything in this country that sucks because they want it to suck. Because they profit more off of this country sucking than this country being like the fucking land of the future where everybody can walk anywhere they want and like everything is free and you have like 50 different friends in every city. I don't know, some shit like that, right? America could be a utopia were it not for the capital vultures that are explicitly intent on exploiting the resources and people of this country and the incentive structures that necessitate the existence of such a group. Sorry, I'm slopulist posting a little bit. I mean, I think everybody knows I have a populist bias, but you know, I mean, I'm populist and I'm also anti-populist because people are fucking stupid. But you know, you need that narrative. You need that emotionally compelling narrative, and conveniently, there's a pretty true emotionally compelling narrative that a very small handful of very wealthy people make everything worse for the sake of their own profits, and you know, we need to destroy the conditions that allow such a group to even be created in the first place. All that from talking about student debt, because I think education is one of the things that gets me like the most passionate and animated. I've seen, frankly, a disturbing amount of like Polymarket shit coming up on Twitter, which substantiates literally everything that I'm talking about, right? It's all just extraction, parasites extracting wealth from the bottom up, right? Because Polymarket is gambling. You bet on whether or not a certain outcome will happen that you may or may not know is going to happen. That's gambling. Whoever loses, whoever wins or loses the bet, whether you make or lose money, the house always wins. Oh yeah, I've seen anybody seen this letter? This is a letter from Jeffrey Epstein to Larry Nasser, another very high profile pedophile. This letter allegedly was sent by Epstein to him. Let's see. As you know by now, I've taken the short route home. Good luck. We share one thing, our love and caring for young ladies. Hope they've reached their full potential. Our president shares our love of young, nubile girls. Jesus Christ, that felt gross to even read. When a young beauty walked by, he loved to. Okay. Life is unfair. Yours, Jeffrey Epstein. Letter was returned to sender. The report indicates that Epstein sent a letter to Nasser from prison before his suicide. The contents of that letter were never revealed. Additional documents show that the letter was submitted for handwriting analysis, though it is unclear if investigators reached a conclusion on whether or not this was definitively written by Epstein. These are from the Epstein files. Okay, so I want to touch on this because I've seen people saying that this letter is legit. I've seen people saying that this letter might not be legit. There seems to be incredible evidence for both. And there are some people insisting that this letter is evidence that Jeffrey Epstein killed himself. This person saying that this could be like a hilarious plot twist would be funny, but I don't think this necessarily proves that like Jeffrey Epstein killed himself or anything like that. I think that if you infer that, like, wow, Jeffrey Epstein did kill himself actually, based on this, I think you're like full of hot air. Um, yeah, this letter has been reported on before. Like, we knew this existed. Yeah, like, there's still guys, there's still an overwhelming preponderance of pedophiles in this sex trafficking ring that would have wanted Jeffrey Epstein dead. There was an indication that he might squeal on some of them. And he died under extremely suspicious circumstances with the footage from the time where he killed himself still being missing from the prison, and a cover-up having happened afterwards to that effect. Oh yeah, here's the footage, nothing unusual here. Cue the 1 million unusual things people found in the footage, like inconsistencies where they're like, oh, there's actually just a giant cut stitched in here or something like that. But people have been talking about this. And I figured it noteworthy to bring up. I'm not going to look at that. It truly does get like more and more cooked for the Trump administration, which I am very happy about. Oh, yeah. Okay. This is everywhere in the files. Okay. So the files were released in sequence, and there are so many of them missing. So you can see here 360, let's see, 76 is missing, 78 is missing, 83 through 96 is missing, 100 is missing, 102 to 104 is missing. There are a lot of these, right? Like selective. Yeah, the EFTA 0036076 shaped .pdf shaped lump in my belly. It is so blatant that you can go in. I think I even did a little thread on this too, where some people are saying like, it's like normal that there could be some missing pages. I don't buy that because they are named numerically sequentially, right? Not necessarily for the number on the page. Like the page could be a number in a series of documents, but they were released in sequence like, oh, this is the first file released, so it's number 1. Let me see if I can find the ones that I found. I posted about this yesterday, I think. Yeah, here it is. This is from the 2020. I went to the. You do not have to dig very far to find the like discrepancies here. I went to the Justice Department website, and this is from United States v. Maxwell, Ghislaine Maxwell, number 120 CR 00330, Southern District in New York, 2020. Right, this is from the 2020 case files against Ghislaine Maxwell. Right away, file number 3 is missing. Scroll down further. 56, 57, and 58 are also missing. 82, 83, and 84 are missing. 150 through 157 are missing. 174 through 179 are missing at the very least. since this is numbered, there could be more 173 files that are missing that I don't know. And this goes on. There's like more than 1,000 numbered PDF files. Here, there's like more than 1,000 of these, and I stopped at about 200, and I had already found this many of them missing in this one case. The point, of course, being that this is the most blatant and possibly funniest cover up of all time. I just can't I can't stop bathing in that discourse, can I? Where it's like a train wreck. You just can't pull your eyes away from it. Oh, look at this. Epstein document file EFTA 000200518 is an FBI case file that includes an accusation of rape involving Donald Trump. The DOJ has now removed the file from the website. Just like that, it's gone. And I'm sure if we look at this link, I'm not a robot, thank you. Yeah, wow, would you look at that? There's no 518. Oh, there's a lot of things missing. Several reporters, though, saw it before the file was removed. Here's a summary. Trump named in new Epstein files. I wonder how this is going to go down. Anyways, I just talk about games instead. It's my stream. I talk about what I talk about. I had been seeing other stuff too on I know, Gotron. I'm riffing. It's called mewing. You should try it sometime. Or something. Everybody's talking about the fucking Epstein files. Oh yeah, this is kind of funny. Explanation. This is basically how GDP works. Hire a friend for $1,000 to dig a hole. He hires you to fill the hole for $1,000. Repeat this process indefinitely, infinite GDP growth and job creation. This is actually just how economic data is recorded. Which is why money is supposed to circulate a lot, instead of enormous amounts of money just being poured into a black hole once. It's like, imagine there's 1,000 people who are exchanging $1,000, right? But they all do different things. And that same $1,000 is like circulating around a bunch of times. And they all do different things that isn't just digging a hole and filling a hole. They're doing real stuff. And that's real economic activity. But you could also just have this. You could have a data center. You could have like a company pouring billions of dollars into a data center that they'll never get back. And they're like, yep, that's GDP growth. That's jobs or something. Extremely lame fucking economic system. Hear that smiling friends meme, Alan? We are so fucked. True. It's been known to happen. I've been playing a lot of Poke Rogue lately. Pokemon roguelike in like browser game. It's a lot of fun. I've undertaken a kind of challenge in that game to basically unlock use the Pokemon that you could find before the first gym in each like generation of Pokemon to unlock these various different like things with them, like unlock their passive or like hidden ability and stuff like that. It's a cool game. Uh, but I was thinking about playing it on stream, but that was before I actually beat the game in classic mode and unlocked the endless mode or whatever. So that's kind of something I'm going to be doing mostly off stream. I also saw that like CBS 60 Minutes the I was talking about that documentary, that CCOT documentary that had been cut. Uh, and apparently it got out there anyway because like they apparently only censored it in the United States, so people have been able to access it from Canada and whatnot. And there's like bootleg versions of it, or bootlegged versions of it online, not bootleg versions, because that would imply some sort of analog that's not actually the thing. It is very entertaining how flagrantly and like unsubtly they're trying to control the media landscape, like the fucking these fucking deep state ghouls and shit. It speaks to what I was saying about how dumb the capital class is, that when you have that much wealth and your aims are so profoundly antisocial, when your brain state is so profoundly antisocial, it makes you dumber. You know, their objective is I fucking hate everybody and I want everybody to die. And there's a limit to how smart you can be while pursuing that as your objective, because being intelligent is like a social concept. It exists in the context of other things, in large part human society and social structures. And if your life and identity kind of revolves around hating said social structures and trying to destroy them and being against them and being the antithesis of that, you're kind of also, in many ways, a living antithesis of intelligence. Yes, this is why you should run the fuck away from yes men and enablers. You need people that are occasionally critical of you, that genuinely do want to see you succeed as a person and care about you, but won't just affirm you regardless, right? Because that kills your critical thinking skills. And that's why a lot of billionaires get very dumb very quick. I have been thinking about like movies and stuff lately. I've actually been excited to see what is it? Wake Up Dead Man, a Knives Out story. Nobody spoil it if you have seen it, because I want to see it. Apparently, it's available on Netflix. I would love to watch it there. Um, I actually really like Daniel Craig as Benoit Blanc, this like older, very fashionable gay man. And you know what's funny is he's exactly my type too. It's perfect. It's perfect. You know, I'm a lot more my type is a lot narrower with guys, right? But uh, uh, the character of Benoit Blanc is very much my type. And I think Ryan Johnson, in making the like Knives Out kinds of movies, is very much like a director auteur. Like there's a lot of him in those movies, uh, uh, because it's not like a much larger studio production where uh, it's more like market tested and subject to committee and whatever. It's more like I mean, it's a little bit more artistic in that sense, and I really like that Glass Onion and Knives Out involved a lot of plot twists and class commentary. Big fan of that. Is it slopulism? Yes, sometimes. uh, but nonetheless, I think you could read it as like slopulous, but you can also read beyond that. Like in Knives Out, came out in was 2017, I think. So feel comfortable not like worrying about spoilers there. Um, on the surface, it's a pretty like easy read of the sort of limousine liberals. Like the slopulous surface reading is that these really wealthy liberals are ultimately just the same as conservatives, but they understand they have to virtue signal a bit. Um, but Ransom, who's like the actual killer and whatnot, I think it makes the movie a lot more interesting. Ransom and Harlan and Benoit Blanc, they make it very interesting because Ransom is like more honest and open. And well, actually, not even necessarily open, but he wears his heart on his sleeve, which includes his sort of far right politics, right? The character. But because he's, a person who kind of wears his heart on his sleeve, he's more or less, if he views somebody as like worth being around for whatever reason, he's capable of functioning like pretty normally around them. He is capable of acting in ways that seem very genuine. Even if he's hiding some intentions, you never get that like the thing that he's saying or feeling in that moment isn't genuinely felt. Whereas there's like completely like for the whole rest of the family, with the exception of Harlan, the big patriarch who wrote these great novels and who was the owner of the estate who passed away, right? This is a great ensemble cast, right? The rest of the family sort of exudes disingenuity, right? Disingenuousness. They have this disingenuous air about them. They're very dominated by their super ego, like that which they socially have to present to the world that isn't representative of what they feel, right? Even in a socially acceptable way of what they feel, right? Um, that's the difference between like ego and super ego and id. Id is acting on that pure instinct in ways that violate a lot of social norms. Ego, like with an ego, you are still capable of acknowledging that you feel certain things, certain desires that you have, but you're capable of like also engaging with them in ways that like are compatible with society. You mean the thing from Naruto? Zoomers, when they hear basic Freudian theory, yo, is that like Naruto? Sure, I have never seen Naruto, but sure. Um, but yeah, I think that like the 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 smarter analysis comes from the sort of uh, uh, the difference in psychological character of the wealthy family that's more like quote unquote old money, even though at some point they would have been new money too, but like old money that is more comfortable, like that is not comfortable dropping any sort of mask versus new money, who's a lot, in many ways, more evil, but kind of wears their feelings on their sleeves and is much more entertaining to watch. You know, Ransom is played by Chris Evans, which is interesting because that's also a component part of the story. That like this movie came out in 2017, which was in the heat of like the MCU and all that. Everybody knew Chris Evans as this charismatic, very handsome Captain America, pure of mind and soul. And so people, the sort of meta element of that movie is people projected that onto Ransom. And then he just very much wasn't that. Um, then in Glass Onion, right? Obviously, the surface level sloppulous thing is that Miles Braun is very obviously a stand in for Elon Musk. The billionaire is fucking stupid and like wants it all for himself and got to the top by cheating and whatever, founder worship, etc., etc. That stuff is all right up front. But a little bit deeper, you realize the sort of complicity of the entire social circle that they have built up, right? Like you were talking about being surrounded by yes men. The deeper analysis of that movie is that like uh it's not just the one billionaire, right? Everybody they know is this sort of mindlessly affirming uh person that further facilitates brain death by never telling them, yo, that's fucking stupid. And at the end, even though it seems like they're all like, oh yeah, we're willing to lie because we feel bad for our other friend who was killed or whatever, you know, they're still the same characters fundamentally, willing to lie for the sake of the convenience of their own careers. You know, just this time they have an excuse to do it in service of something good, which shows that they are still very human and still have a bias towards justice in whatever perverse way they see it as still compatible with their lives and like social and political standing, you know? They're good movies. I don't like I don't know if I'm trying to not go in with any particular expectations for Wake Up Dead Man, a Knives Out mystery, aside from that Benoit Blanc will be there and will be hot. That's my expectation. Uh, because I feel like those movies are crafted in such a way that like they don't respond well to you forming expectations. Like you're you know, it kind of challenges you for forming such expectations. And I want to go in without expectations. So I feel like I could enjoy the movie more, if that makes sense. I feel like in general, I enjoy uh, certain media a lot more if I don't form expectations about it. And I think my opinions are better formed if I don't form expectations of it beforehand, right? If I feel like I can get too good of an idea of what a piece of media is about or what the experience will be like without actually watching it or reading it or experiencing it directly, then that tends to dissuade me from doing that, you know? It sounds very highfalutin and like I want to tell everybody I'm smarter than them or whatever, but I mean, that's not me saying that people that watch like quote unquote dumb movies or movies that aren't necessarily quote unquote smart. That's not me like belittling people who enjoy that stuff. movie going is as much a social experience as anything. I don't think it matters what kind of movie people are watching. If they're going with their friends and getting a bucket of popcorn, they have a great time and they remember it afterwards. It's like, oh yeah, that was really fun. Uh, you know, yeah, I like to politically analyze movies as I'm watching them, but that's much more of an academic pursuit. It's a little bit more of a solitary pursuit too, which is, is a little bit more fitting of my life being more of uh, a solitary creature by sometimes by choice and many times not. Um, it's just that's just the way that I have learned to engage with media, right? There are no people around me that actually want to be social. Such is one of the many problems of modern America. Most I can get out of people is hi, hello, how is your day? Yeah, yeah. You know what helps is that I do want to be social. When you go into a store, there are stores where I live. There's like I live in a little downtown area. It's nice. And you get like a greeting card. You get some candy at the candy shop or something. And or even just you're checking out at the grocery store. And there's the formality of um them saying, have a nice day, have a good one, thanks, thank you very much, have a nice day, right? And it's easy to formulate the sense that they don't mean it. But the thing for me is I don't care that they don't mean it. Because when I say thanks, you have a good day too, I do mean it. Right? Like, and I'm sure they do too. Like, and that makes the prospect of socializing a lot easier for me when it's genuinely like I go out and even if it's just hi, hey, what's up? It's like, oh, they saw me and saw fit to acknowledge me. Yay. I said hi. That's nice. They said have a nice day. I said have a nice day back. I don't know if they meant it, but I did. I want them to have a nice day because that'd be good. It would be fucked up if they didn't have a nice day. That'd be bad. I don't want that for them. But sometimes it can weigh on you when like that's the extent of your interactions with people. I find that like being genuine in those interactions makes it a little bit better. But you need that frequency so that you kind of breach a little bit past small talk sometimes. Small talk being like, hey, hi, how are you? Blah, blah, blah. Maybe you talk about something a little bit more personal. It's like, oh, here's what, I've been doing such and such this week. Of course, the trick is finding an excuse to go anywhere and do stuff, right? It's goofy sometimes when humans are like bricks. Yeah, it sucks. Look, it goes back to what I was saying earlier about like a lot of the country right now, particularly, especially America, being very antisocial because it seems like more and more infrastructure is designed to make you not want to be social, you know? It's designed to prevent people from being social, having prolonged periods of just hanging out and talking to each other, right? Think about the prevalence of roads. You're like, you are so discouraged from not using a car that it might literally be impossible to live in some places without a car. And even if you theoretically could, you literally risk death every time you go outside. Like, and I don't mean just in the abstract sense of like, yeah, obviously, ever since you're born, there's a risk that you die, right? Like you live and then you die. No, I mean like real credible threat of harm every single time you step outside your house or apartment because there's like a busy street that you have to cross, you know? And that threat is much more present when you're not in Zipod, you know? And it's been shown, it has actually been shown by sociological research. Yeah, that's like for America, that's just Tuesday, but it's been shown by sociological research that when people live in Zipod, when like everybody has car brain, that demonstrably damages the social landscape of the city. It demonstrably makes people more antisocial towards each other. You know, cars have made all of our lives worse because they've enabled things to be designed without people in mind. You know, now this city, this place where ostensibly people live, is not designed for people. It like, yeah. You're a person, whatever. What we're concerned about is cars. Cars don't have fucking feelings. Cars don't have a brain, a sentient, like, conscious mind. They're not living beings with rights. People, though, people have rights, allegedly. And like I said, the removal of seating and whatever, it's just the world has been in a cascade of getting more antisocial over time. And you have to, the biggest thing for me is that people have had to try increasingly hard. They've had to face higher and higher barriers in order to just live like a relatively socially functional life, which inevitably leads to people on the whole becoming more antisocial. You know? So it's hard to find that shit. It's hard to fill those needs anymore. You know? Shit, I was like, this is a little bit of venting from me, but when I lived in the DC area, I talked about on stream sometimes that I would volunteer with the food bank. There was some nice in-person volunteering. I met cool people, and I packaged chicken, and like, sure, it was work, but like, I enjoyed that. It filled a social need, and I was happy. I was happy to ride my bike 3 fucking miles to go package chicken for 2 hours because there were people there, cool people that I got to talk to and that I grew to know personally over time. There is a food bank in this town too, but they make it way harder to find volunteer opportunities. It's all like, oh yeah, come gleaning at this farm. You don't have you have, I know they have pantries in town. They have food banks in town. Let me volunteer, please. Let me put the shit in the bag. Just let me put the chicken in the bag. Let me put the potatoes in the box. Please, just let me do something. Even the social structures that I was able to avail myself of. Volunteer labor. Shit, who the fuck do I have to go to offer free labor on a goddamn Saturday afternoon anymore, right? This is how, like, it shouldn't be this hard to find somewhere to walk over to and donate your labor to a social project during your free time. I feel like this is actually a certain level of rock bottom. Like, civil society is actively dying because of roads and cars and people's hatred for homeless people and the fucking whatever. Yeah, that is true. If you gain, like, you have social skills, you kind of lap people in conversation. It's like, it's almost like you see the Matrix. It feels good sometimes to know how to, like, just talk to people like you want to talk to them. You know, like sometimes when I was much more antisocial, it was like, you know, you overthink a lot of stuff, you know, and you assume that it is kind of like a disingenuous script that you have to follow. But you come to find out, what I found out is it's not that hard to be interested in what people are talking about, you know? It really isn't. A lot of times it just takes a recognition that, like, yeah, this is exactly what I want to do with my time. I'm going to listen to this person and I'm going to, like, maybe I'll contribute. Maybe I'll just listen to the experiences that they're sharing or whatever. And that's like, that's great. But it's kind of hard to do that anymore. It's kind of hard to find a venue with which to do that. You know, work environments are increasingly antisocial. Public spaces are increasingly hostile to the public. You know, volunteer organizations are increasingly opaque to people who would want to volunteer. And local government has started to be less and less local, you know, biased towards like not doing anything. Anyways, I was talking about movies. I was talking about Wake Up Dead Man, Knives Out mystery. I think I'm gonna watch that. It'll be good. It'll be fun. I'm trying to work on like part of the reason that I wanted to do this without my like list of topics is I want to get better at like remembering certain things of note that I've seen. You know what? Let's end it. I talked a lot about how society is devolving into an antisocial mess, and this is still a little bit that. But I want to end this stream with something a little bit more fun, which is the infighting that's currently happening on the right, particularly centering Turning Point USA. Let's see, very good. Here we go. Okay, Politico reporting. It's not going to be the best reporting. It's Politico. We know there are a bunch of Hitlerites, but look, the girls are fighting. Tea has been spilled. Benny Boy is not pulling any rhetorical punches here, and it's quite fun to watch. So the long and the short of this, like the context behind this, I think is that Candace Owens and the right wing broadly has been leaning increasingly into anti-Semitism to try to recapture the populist fervor that they very desperately rely on within their base. And Ben Shapiro all of a sudden is having his face eaten by the leopards. And because he's Jewish. You know, nobody knew that Ben Shapiro, guy who wears a yarmulke all the time, is Jewish. This is new information. But he started throwing haymakers at Tucker Carlson, at Candace Owens, and shit like that. The right wing has actually kind of been eating itself over this. MAGA infighting erupts at Turning Point USA conference. Yet another piece of evidence, again, on the pile that MAGA is dead. And oh boy, is it fun to watch. In Phoenix, members of the MAGA faithful gathered on Thursday to kick off TPUSA's America Fest, the largest meeting for the organization since its founder, Charlie Kirk, was shot to death on a Utah college campus in September. Despite that somber backdrop, the event quickly devolved into a spectacle of MAGA infighting. Ben Shapiro, the first speaker after widow Erica Kirk, ripped into those who would take the same stage in the coming hours and days. Ooh, he got it out of the way early. He called out conservative commentators blasting Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, Megyn Kelly, and Steve Bannon as frauds and grifters. The conservative movement is in serious danger, Shapiro said, arguing the danger is not just on the left, but from charlatans who claim to speak in the name of principle, but actually traffic in conspiracism and dishonesty. He called Bannon a PR flack for Jeffrey Epstein. Oh, shit. While praising Trump and his administration's handling of the issue. What? How the fuck does this make sense? Bro, what? Oh my God. Trump pushed to stop Republicans in Congress. Yeah. We know the background of the Epstein files. Both Bannon and Trump appear in those files. Thank you. Very cool. Shapiro particularly focused on Carlson, both for elevating Owen's conspiracy theories about Kirk's murder and for his recent interview with far-right influencer Nick Fuentes, a Holocaust denier who's repeatedly pushed anti-Semitic tropes. Carlson, a former Fox News host, now hosts a show on Twitter and routinely garners millions of views. The people who refuse to condemn Candace's truly vicious attacks, and some of them are speaking here tonight, are guilty of cowardice, Shapiro said, adding later, if you host a Hitler apologist, Nazi-loving, anti-American piece of refuse like Nick Fuentes, you ought to own it. I agree. This is something common to many just regular people and Ben Shapiro, is that a lot of times, like, they'll own what they believe. I'll own what I believe. Ben Shapiro tends to also own what he believes, at least to a certain extent. But common to Fuentes and, well, maybe not actually Fuentes, but certainly Carlson, Owens, etc., is they cannot own up to some of their more edgy, controversial beliefs that they find convenient to air when it's like to the YouTube audience, but is decidedly inconvenient when they're in front of a more traditional audience. And by traditional audience, I mean like proximal to power. It is very nice to see the infighting that is tearing the right wing apart, because it's important to mention that the only real place of disagreement between Ben Shapiro and these other right-wing pundits is Israel. He doesn't object to all that other stuff. He objects to the anti-Israel. I feel like Ben Shapiro may also object legitimately to the anti-Semitism, but I think for him it's mostly Israel, right? I do think, like, I don't think Ben Shapiro would have a good explanation for the very large sub-coalition of Jewish progressives in America. You know, progressives being aligned across racial, ethnic, gendered, whatever boundaries in their decrying of Israel, precisely because Israel foments and spreads anti-Semitism. I don't think Ben would have an answer for that. I think he does genuinely believe both, but I think if that contradiction were to come to bear, I think Israel would have to find a way to square it so that Israel doesn't lose out, if that makes sense. He's not a dumb person, I don't think. Not as far as the right wing goes, certainly, but, you know, still a right winger, still a fascist, and still very internally contradictory. But a grifter, I don't think he is entirely. A plant, sure. An industry prop, sure. You know, a stooge for the deep state. Yeah, I think you could make that argument. But I think he actually believes that. I think he just genuinely shares that ideology. Tucker Carlson and these other types genuinely do not believe anything. Tucker Carlson particularly is a good example because you can find, there's a clip of him on CNN. He used to be on CNN in the 90s. Tucker Carlson was a CNN pundit. And he actually delivered a very eloquent takedown of Bill O'Reilly for exactly this kind of grift circuit. This sort of right-wing media tour. You know, that like the only end to which their beliefs ostensibly exist is not to see them brought about in political terms in the real world and apply it to society, but rather to line their own pockets through like book tours and stuff. Of course, back in the day, it would have been book tours. Nowadays, it's more like, these kinds of conferences where they're paid exorbitant sums to be speakers and that sort of thing, because that kind of narrative propagation and ideological capture is very valuable. Tucker Carlson is the same person in this same grift cycle that he himself critiqued 30 years ago. So is Megyn Kelly. So is, Steve Bannon might be a little bit more of a true believer, but he's definitely part of that cycle too. Erica Kirk definitely is as well. Horror movie monster looking ass widow. We're witnessing the right-wing movement. Yeah, they just don't want to put the fries in the bag. Honestly, I can't blame them, because having the job where you put the fries in the bag fucking sucks. But like, yeah, they are just, their ideology is just their own career, right? Where other people, their ideology actually extends beyond that, you know? The right-wing coalition is going to be like in increasing disarray, and that's going to be really, really entertaining to watch. Especially because the right wing, as of now, like Ben Shapiro being just recently alienated completely from the right wing, I think now they're mostly only left with I think genuinely Michael Knowles and Matt Walsh might be the most intelligent people that the American right wing have to offer anymore, which is hilarious, And again, they're both pundits whose shows have been supported from the top down. All of this stuff, none of this would exist if it weren't for that top-down support from the capital class. Remember what I've said when I talk about European far-right parties. None of these right-wingers like each other. They all hate each other, which is why they catfight so much. They're all just profoundly miserable people who find camaraderie in shared vice signaling. Base. Trans people are mentally ill, something, 40% suicide, whatever. The Jews control the government or something. And then they just all post base. And there's camaraderie in that. But these people can't stand being around each other because there's nothing going on up there. There's nothing going on in their heads. I remember a particular campaign event of Donald Trump's where I think he was in Florida, and it left a bunch of people stranded in the cold one evening because they either forgot to send the bus or the bus was late, or no, I think it was they just ended up not sending the bus at all to pick people up from this event. And videos and stuff circulated on social media about it. They instantly went to conspiracy posting that something about this is suspicious. I bet it was such and such. It were genuinely incomprehensible lines of thinking. This movement cannot survive on its own 2 feet. It's not coherent enough. There's not enough cohesion for it to survive. It has to be held together from outside of the group. And the capital class is the group responsible for holding it together as such. But even they can't do that forever. It's like forcing the same pole of 2 magnets together, right? North and north on a little magnet. You try to force them together. Sure, you might be able to do it. But you can't hold it, right? There's an inherent resistance there. There's just such a lack of personality and thought on the right that it's impossible to create that kind of political movement from the bottom up. Reactionism, I don't intend to say that like reactionism is fake. Plenty of people are like authentically racist, but the mishmash of positions that is American conservatism, like the American conservative movement, the MAGA movement as it became in the 2010s and is now disintegrating as in the 2020s, is not real. It only exists because the capital class built it for themselves. It is one of the purest examples. I talked about this being relevant in archaeology and the study of past states and governments. MAGA is a very pure example of ideology being disingenuously manufactured from the top down because it benefits the people at the top. It doesn't matter how many holes there are in the ideology. If you have overwhelming narrative capture, you can use that to propagate your own interests by making sure that is the only narrative. Now, it's falling apart because the narrative is falling apart, not because a counter narrative has been introduced. I promise you, Democrats have done all of jack shit unless your name is Zoran Mamdani or Ro Khanna or Bernie Sanders. Democrats have done jack shit to construct a counter narrative that can rival such capture. But now it's like one arm isn't doing what the other arm needs it to do, right? The fighting is coming from within. The disintegration is all because of stuff internal to the constitution of that movement. Hopefully that makes sense. Yeah, this is what happens when you have an ideology manufactured from the top down, and then there's a crisis directly relating to that ideology at the top level, is that it ceases to be viable as a, political rallying point or a political coalition. I think that was good. I talked about some stuff I wanted to talk about. Obviously, I wasn't gonna I don't think I'll be able to always hit on like everything that I think is interesting in a given day, but it was good. It was good. Um, and again, I talked about some news, but I think mostly I wanted to do political analysis and such. Hassan is live. He's talking about the 60 Minutes CCOT piece and the Streisand effect. Aha! I knew somebody else would talk about that. I fucking love the Streisand effect. Definitely one of my favorite social scientific principles. I'm gonna raid Hassan, even though he is fucking massive streamer. I'll see y'all next time, which would be tomorrow. And then per this schedule, I'm gonna not stream until next week. Although I might even take a break between now and New Year's. We'll see. We'll see. But definitely see you tomorrow.